Welcome to Beyond Accidentals podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis, and we are here for our 13th episode. And we are going to continue our journey down the road of high school girls basketball in Massachusetts. And last week we had a tremendous coach on, and Jay Keene from Malden Catholic Girls High School. And this week we have another incredible basketball coach on here. I'm going to introduce this coach, and before I do, I'm just going to read off some statistics here. I'm going to read these off in two parts. I'm going to read these off as part one, team statistics, titles, league championships, so on and so forth. And then I'm going to read off some of the accolades of the coach that we have on today. So 12-year head coach at Millis High School, state champions in 2009, 2014, 2015, and almost in 2016, completing the three-peat, but lost in the final game. They have 5 district titles, 2009, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2019. And that's just the team's numbers. And I'm going to talk about the coaching accolades here a little bit, which is pretty impressive. In 2009 and in 2015, 2 separate times, was the Mass Basketball Coaches Association Coach of the Year. In 2009 was the Boston Globe Division IV Coach of the Year. 2015 MIAA Coach of the Year, and the 2019 Tri-Valley Coach of the Year. And we all know how difficult the league of Tri-Valley is for sure. I maybe has a cure to the coronavirus too. I don't know after reading off all that, but we're really excited for our guest today, someone who I think adds a lot of knowledge and is just a tremendous coach that I can't wait to learn more about. Again, from Millis High School, ladies and gentlemen, Dave Fallon.
Thanks so much, Anthony, for having me on. I'm going to try to live up to all the things you read off. I really appreciate that welcome.
Yeah, unbelievable. I'm just reading the facts. I'm just here to deliver the facts. That's it. So let's just, kind of break the ice here and talk a little bit about how you got started into coaching. Was it a lot of coaches I talked to, they seemed right out of college, they're into it. Talk about your journey into coaching a little bit and how you got to where you were.
Yeah. So my dad was my coach my whole life. My dad was more of a baseball guy than a basketball guy, but a good coach. I think that was kind of my first introduction. And then I went to Northeastern, and when I was in Northeastern, I volunteered to coach a little league team in the South End. And then a girl in one of my classes asked if I could help coach a basketball team that was starting at Fenway High School. The irony is interesting because then we ended up playing them in 2015 for a state title. But that was in 2001. They just started. So that's kind of how I guess I got my feet wet a little bit. And then I ended up at Millis out of college, a really small school. We have less than 400 students in the whole school. I helped out the boys program for a year, just as like a varsity assistant. And then the girls varsity coach approached me and said, "Hey, we have a freshman girls job. Would you be interested?" And never in my life did I actually ever consider coaching girls. So I paused for a moment because I was just I wasn't sure what that would entail, if that would be different. And then I said, you know what, let's do it. And I coached the freshmen for 2 years, the JV for 2 years, and the gentleman that initially kind of lured me in, he retired, and then I took over in 2008, and it's been awesome. It's been a lot of fun.
I mean, it sounds pretty awesome from what we've read and what we heard and what we know so far. So, that's great. So you put some years in as an assistant and obviously understanding the program and how it's run, and you have a head coach above you that you learned from. Talk about when you do get the job though, right? Because there's such an adjustment from being maybe the number 2 to becoming the number 1. Talk about maybe the most difficult adjustment there was from being the assistant coach to now becoming the head coach of the program.
A lot of adjustments for sure. I mean, one of the things is, as you know, when you're a freshman coach or a JV coach, when you go to those varsity games, you're an assistant and you have a different relationship with the kids. It's definitely more casual, in practice. You're a sounding board for them, just different capacities. So you get to really know kids, I think in some ways a more personal way, or at least a different way. When you become head coach, I mean, it's a different kind of beast. Not that you need to switch who you are, but you're leading a program. I've always felt like I'm not the varsity coach, I'm the program coach, and I want to be, some people work independently and their JV coach does this and their varsity, but that's not really, what I'm about. So, it's a lot of responsibility. And then also, only know what you know, and what you think is going to make a good program, but there's a little, experience factor too, that, you have to figure out kind of how you want to do it. And, you still tinker with that. I still continue to think about philosophy and how I'm going to do things and changing things all the time.
Yeah, and for you, like taking over this program, and I think that's what's so important is that you don't realize all the other things that come with becoming a head coach, because as an assistant, like you said, it's a different relationship with the kids. It's a different relationship on what your job is, and you're just so focused on the in-game stuff and not having to worry about everything else off to the side. I've always found that was the biggest adjustment for me. That and just making tough calls at tough times, and how you're making the right decision, so on and so forth. But for you, I'm going to ask you this question in two parts. You took over the program in 2008. 2009, you won a championship. You won a state championship. So within, your year two of your program, you won a state championship. So part one of the question is, talk about the program you kind of inherited. What did you change to make it become yours to have this success so quickly?
Yeah. So I certainly did not inherit a program that was, the cupboard was bare. It was definitely moving in the right direction. It did not have a history of a lot of success, but we had just started the process of kind of qualifying for the playoffs. But I would say, there was a culture that was already there in terms of, working extremely hard and kind of having a blue collar attitude and all the things that kind of make up, the town that I teach in. So that part was already there for me. But it was also nice is that I coached the freshman team. So by the time I moved up, I had all those kids as seventh graders, and I had a really good freshman team. I think we went 13-3. It was my first year ever coaching girls. I was like, oh, you know what? This is awesome. I had, I had studs in, it really made it nice. I had 1,000-point score on my team and as a seventh grader, so by the time they were seniors, then I was their coach. And that was kind of, interesting too. So yeah, I mean, I inherited something that was there. It was already, there was a framework there. It was a foundation, and naturally, there was more building to do, but, that was a huge help. But then I'll also say this, we won the state title, my second year, and then we went down. We actually ended up 1-19 2 years later, and almost like the bottom fell out. And that's when we really, I think, started building something that we hope will last. That's when the work really began. So we had immediate success, but then I think it was a learning lesson about how do you sustain it.
Yeah, and it's probably a humbling lesson, right, Coach? Because here you are kind of making it to the mountaintop so early on, and then you kind of face a little bit of a difficult, decline or go down a little bit before you start building your program back up. But you did. I mean, then you can see the later part of the 2010s, especially in the middle, to the current run now, you've built something pretty special there. What I'll ask you, Coach, is talk about your program's culture right now, because you did have great success early on. You said you dipped, but in that dip, you were able to start building something that you felt would be sustainable, or try to make it sustainable for a long time. But talk about the culture that must surround your program, the expectation that you have, but probably the girls have on themselves as well.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's a town it's a middle-class town, but I always say it's a blue-collar work ethic. Yeah, all the towns around us are much bigger, not a little bit. They are much bigger. So Millis kids have this kind of farm mentality where they know they have to work their tail off. They know when they have to put a lot of extra work in. So I think that's always kind of the bread and butter of it. Is I feel best when an opposing coach tells me, like, man, your kids play so hard, because it's as simple as that. We try to outwork, right, every team we play. That's it. Besides for that, I think now that we've won, there's an expectation that kids have that they want to win too. I remember reading once, like, Tom Izzo said like he wanted to bring every senior class to a Final Four, and I think he almost has, which is ridiculous. But I kind of feel like that now, that every senior class, I want to have them experience to play in a state title game. I just think it's, it's the most amazing feeling you get to that game. So yeah, I think the players have taken care of the rest of it for me. A lot of young girls have idolized the girls in front of them, and they'll still talk to me about their first Millis game. So it's kind of just bred that.
That's awesome. And a winning culture and a fun culture like that is just even more fun to coach, knowing that you had your hand on it, you created it. And like you said, you kind of had to go through a little bit of a difficult time to understand what you needed to build your program back up. And now you've kind of created a monster. I mean, let's be honest. So you talked about the biggest compliment you get is when a coach tells you how hard your team works. So I did a little bit of research on you, and I researched a game that you played last year against Bellingham. You won 51-30. And I just want to read the quote exactly because I think it ties into kind of what you just said. It says, "We want to run every possession, off misses, off takes, or off turnovers." And you talk about you wanting to build a culture that is hardworking, blue collar. Off of that, I mean, you also had 16 layups in that game. That equates to 32 points. So talk about the hard work you must put into practice in order to be a team that can just take off and fly up the court right away in a game.
Yeah. So, the philosophy that I've followed in terms of the X's and O's is we want to play as aggressively and as fast as possible. Like you're never going to come into our gym and we're not ever sit back in the 2-3 zone. Like it's just not going to happen. We're going to come after you. We're going to press you all over the court. We're going to press you full court, 3/4 court, half court. You come out of a timeout, you're going to see a different look. I think the kids like playing that way. It keeps them constantly engaged in the game. It also allows me to naturally play more players. We've had a lot of I would say pure athletes, a lot of soccer kids that we've turned into basketball players. So it's fun. And then on the other end, we want to, we want to get a turnover and we just want to play. We don't want to, we're going to run stuff, but it's way more fun just to play up and down. So we do a lot of conditioning. My girls will probably tell you it's worse than it really is when they're in it. When you're in high school, though, everything seems very intense, but I will say, I push them. I push them really hard. I've never looked at, anything as boys versus girls, or maybe I should not in terms of how I coach a practice or what I demand, I have high expectations, but I think they know that, and the kids want to meet those expectations because they know it pays off. They talk about it almost more than I do now in terms of, what we're doing, but they're not always fun practices, but I think they pay off.
Yeah, and I think, you hit upon something that's really important. It allows you to utilize your bench, and that kind of was going to lead me to my next point a little bit. The game of I'm so familiar with the game of football where we try to utilize a lot of kids in certain packages or certain situational things. Talk about that in basketball because if you're playing that type of offense and you're flying up and down the court, yes, you got to be in good condition. But like you said, girls, 5 or 6, 7 players can't play at that tempo, I think, the entire time. So how do you utilize your bench into a game? Do you do it kind of like in situational things, or are you
Yeah, I think it's still one of the most difficult parts of coaching, right? Is how do you make sure you play your bench? Those kids, they work so hard at practice. How do you do it? I think there's a lot of different ways. I think first is your opponent, in what style are they playing, and you got to think about matchups, and you got to think about, for instance, we're playing a team that's playing us in a 2-3 zone. Well, I need some shooters on the floor. Maybe I play, a girl who doesn't play as much when we play a man team because that's not her strength, but she's a really good, zone offensive threat. I think there's times in the first half where I think it's easier to get kids I think I try to get every kid I can in the first half. Because I find the longer a game goes, it becomes more and more difficult naturally. Everyone seems to tighten up a little bit, but I just try to get kids at least into a game. But I'm certainly not perfect at it. I think it's tough. It's tough to get them all in, even with the way we play. It's still tough because you're trying to compete, and you do want to play kids that you think are going to give you the best chance of winning as well.
So up-tempo style, fast-paced going up and down the court. I always found interested in that when LeBron played for the Miami Heat and Eric Spoelstra, he went to a couple of Oregon practices to talk about, the spread offense and looking at ways to kind of spread out the court and get the ball up the court quickly, which I always found so interesting to interconnect the sports. But talk about practice style, because in order for you to be able to score so quickly in transition, you must practice situationally a lot how you get yourself in position to do that. So maybe walk us through stylistically a practice of yours.
Yeah, I mean, first, my practice is up tempo. Like we're gonna go from one thing to the next without much time in between. There's not a lot of this. There's not a lot of talking. You got to talk in sound bites, I think, to this generation especially. But we just try to move as quickly as possible to try to replicate the speed of which we're going to play. In terms of actual transition, we do a lot of 2-on-1 and 3-on-2s, and we press in practice. And I try to not blow the whistle as much as I think I probably did when I was a younger coach. And you try to almost stop and orchestrate too much. And I try to sometimes just step back and let them just play a little bit. And I think I definitely scrimmage more than I used to as well, to just try to let kids actually get the fruits of their labor. When you get a steal, let them score and let them set up their next press. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of it. I think every practice, though, I think the kids know, we want it to be intense. We want it to be the best practice we've had that day.
Yeah, and it's a mentality, right? I think with such a winning culture that you have, it's probably a lot easier to get kids to come in motivated, knowing that you're going to work them, you're going to run them, you're going to make them play basketball. It's going to be tough, but they know what the end result is. So you've done such a great job, I think, in building that and having that culture. I'm a big defensive guy, so we'll flip it to the defensive side. How you must be defensively for you to be able to transition so quickly, whether you're transitioning off of turnovers or getting rebounds and getting the ball quickly. I mean, how good are you on defense? We know how good you are on offense and how quick you can score, but talk about the other side of the ball a little bit.
Yeah, I think defense has always kind of been actually what we're better at. I think naturally some years better than others. But we've always pressed. Some years, we can do more full court pressure. Some years it's better to be 3/4 court or half court traps. We have to play to our strengths a little bit in terms of where our speed is and how much height we have, which is usually not too much. But yeah, I mean, our defense usually creates our offense. So I would say for practice planning purposes, 60% of our practices are defense and 40% are offense, sometimes 70-30. Yeah, it's definitely that comes first and foremost. We have to stop people. Our league is really good. We play Division II and Division III schools, and they are they're state champions in their own right. Medfields and Westwood has a long history in Hopkinton. So if we can't stop anyone, then we could get embarrassed. So it's all about our defense.
Yeah, and you kind of got me right into the next segment. So obviously, in having such success, you play in what I think is a really difficult league, and you kind of just alluded to it. And you explain that to our audience a little bit, because you're a Division IV team, right? And you are playing teams in your league that are eligible to play in the D2 playoffs and the D3 playoffs. So I guess talk about the seesaw balance of that, because in one way you're playing the best competition you're arguably going to play, maybe even in the D4 playoff. But on the flip side of it, if you're losing games and or getting beat up a little bit, it can also mean that your team, it could morale wise could hurt you. So talk about how you balance that all as a coach.
Yeah, that's you definitely characterize it pretty well. So they moved us to Division III, but historically we've been in Division 14.
Okay.
180 girls, and the majority of the schools in our league are Division II. So historically when we'd play all these schools, but then we would qualify under the Sullivan rule. So as long as we won our non-league games and finished 500, we could actually get into the tournament, which a few times we got into the tournament at 9-11. And we made it all the way, almost to the end a few times. One year we won the state championship at 10-10. So that's how good our league is. The Sullivan rule was literally made, in my opinion, for schools like us, because Some years our league is that strong. So it's a double-edged sword. So if you get your butt kicked every night, you can only tell the kids so many times, like, hey, don't forget you're playing a Division II school, because you're not going to build confidence. So you could go into the playoffs and, but if you haven't won any games, that's not good. So what you want to do is, obviously, you want to compete. Though you might not win necessarily TVL titles, you want to compete. And if you competed and you had a pretty good season, there's a confidence that carries over, because in Division IV, we normally did not play anyone that was at the caliber of who was in our league. Besides for a few select schools like a Cohasset, who we had a rivalry with, and some other schools, we knew that, we felt good when we didn't care what the seed was. The seedings, and in most of the schools that we played, just realized the same thing, like, that we didn't get a power ranking, and we most likely should have, because, we were definitely battle tested.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had a few coaches on here that have faced similar situations to you, that they're typically playing way up in competition, that when they get into their respective division playoffs, they're having a lot of success. So it's good to see, it can work both ways. It can work as a positive, like you said, and sometimes there's only so many times you can say, hey, we're playing up, just remember that. So now let's talk a little bit about, let's fast forward and get to like 2014, 2015, 2016, is where you had a pretty impressive run, that you had 3 teams go to the finals back to back to back. You won your first 2, and you had lost a third one from the three-peat in the finals. Not to bring up like open wounds or anything about it, but as the state of your program goes, talk about those 3 years, because those 3 years have probably now catapulted you almost kind of to where you're at now, as far as, exposure to the program, girls in the youth program wanting to play in this. I mean, talk about those 3 years and how they really maybe helped set you up for these past, 4 years.
Yeah, there's no doubt. We had some really special kids. We had 2 1,000-point scorers come through in different classes, but they played together. We just had a heck of a run. We defeated New Mission in 2014, then we defeated Fenway in 2015, and then we played a really good Cathedral team, and who it still stings. We were beating them at halftime, but we ended up losing to them, and they ended up actually, I think, winning back-to-back state titles following that. So it was awesome. It was a great experience. We traveled well. The fan buses were packed. And all the kids I currently coach were in the stands. I know it. A lot of them wearing jerseys of the kids on the court. So it was huge. It definitely it gave us a lot of credibility, and it also was just so much fun. But yeah, we had some talent for sure.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, going there, and then it's just an expectation, right? It's just an expectation that the girls begin to have on themselves. And, as great as a coach you are, and you push them hard, at the end of the day, these girls keep showing up every day wanting to work harder and harder and harder. And that's a testament to you knowing the understanding of the balance of, knowing how hard to push them and knowing that you care about them. And I think with the best coaches, if they know how to, mix those two things really well, then, your program's limitless. So you've had great success there. And you alluded earlier to that you have 180 girls in your school. So I did that average out. It's about 45 girls average per class, if you look at it that way. How do you sustain 3, level varsity pro and varsity JV freshmen? You have small numbers in the school. Can we talk a little bit about maybe the amount of kids that you have in your program and how you are able to balance off all 3 levels of sport?
Yeah, it's been pretty steady in terms of just the same number or lack of numbers. So for instance, my senior class, which is a really talented one, there's only 36 girls in the entire senior class, and I have 5 seniors. And luckily it's a strong class, but when you get a class of 36, if there isn't a lot of talent, I mean, that's it's a lot, and it's a lot of work. So the way we've sustained it is really through our freshman program. So our freshman program is not a true freshman program. We're allowed to play 7th and 8th graders. So our middle school is above our high school. So we have a school within a school thing. So we are allowed to field the freshman team, call it a freshman team, but it's only 7th and 8th graders. And then our traditional freshmen basically all play JV along with some sophomores. of course, some of those could play varsity. So that's how we've done it. And it's been a tremendous advantage, I think, because our 7th and 8th graders are playing true freshman teams. And, they compete and they hang, and it helps us. But that's to me has been probably one of the biggest advantages.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, these girls are playing older girls, more physical girls, especially if you're a 7th grade girl going against a 9th grade girl.
That's quite a
Those 2
difference.
years
Yeah.
is a huge difference. And so being able to play that tougher competition early on has probably paid dividends in, looking at the success that you've had, that these girls are fearless. They'll play anybody, and they haven't been backing down since they've been 12 or 13 years old. They're not going to stop as they rise in the program. That's pretty cool. I mean, it's tough, I'm sure, numbers wise. In some years you're really scrapping at the lower levels, but overall, I mean, those girls are now in your program for all intents and purposes for maybe 5-6 years. I mean, that's great.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
how involved are you in the youth programs? I mean, if you have a lot of 7th and 8th grade girls playing, how involved are you, say, at the elementary level to the middle school level, girl basketball teams?
Yeah, we've definitely been more involved. I would say, the first 2-3 years, I don't think I probably devoted as much energy to it because I was probably overwhelmed with just being the varsity coach. But since then, especially after that 1-19 season, we kind of dedicated ourselves to being involved in every facet of the program. So at the youth, we hold, we have a traditional summer camp like most programs do, but I do coaching clinics. I've actually made DVDs with drills and plays. We head down to practices, and we can help coaches instruct. And then we also host teams. 6th grade A team wants to come to practice tonight, and I've always been an open door policy. You want to come in my gym anytime you want. Bring a notebook, and you want to copy some drills down, whatever you want. And some coaches have been pretty receptive to that. So it's been pretty good. For the most part, everyone's on the same page. We're running all the continuity stuff from Metro all the way up to varsity in terms of here's our offensive systems, here's our defensive systems, and then here's how we're going to play. Like my freshmen, they're going to trap you all over the floor too. Like they're going to press you, so it's everyone's part of that mentality.
That's great. And I'm sure just terminology, if nothing else, getting terminology and seeing these coaches just doing some of these drills, at the moment might not seem like a big deal. But when these girls 4 or 5 years later are still doing the same drills and are doing them even better than they ever have been, it just makes the product better. So that's great that you invest a lot of times in the youth programs. It's not easy because, you have a life, you have
Right.
a family, and you have a lot of other things you got to do on top of your job. And so it's always really difficult to balance that off, but it's great to see. I mean, again, your formula is showing the success that you have. It's great for these young coaches that are listening to see how involved you are.
It's definitely a
Really.
lot. And I just will say too, is you have to have good people around you. I have a 8 and a 3-year-old. So, I can't be as good as I want to be. But I have 2 retired guys who help me, and those guys, they pick up the slack, especially when I need help, and they're willing to coach, they're willing to teach. So, you have to really trust people and invest in people to help you, because they're only as good as the people around you, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, what's your process with that? I mean, having people, just obviously from a basketball standpoint, but also just being around young girls and being a good role model and setting the example. I mean, what's your criteria as an assistant coach to be on your staff? What are some of the things are a must for you?
Well, I've been lucky because the 2 of the guys, I essentially inherited them. So that made it seamless. Once again, keeping the continuity of the program, and they're both, they're basketball junkies. So I think the biggest thing about being an assistant is you want to be the best assistant you can be. It's very cliche, but you got to work at it. Like I want my assistants to feel like this is their program too. And as a coach, I think same thing. I think you get better at it as you get older, like giving people more things. If you're going to show up to my practice, Anthony, you don't want to just sit there for 2 hours. So I want to give you something that you can run. I want to make you feel like you're part of it. I want to hear your insight. You also need people around you that you can trust and you can talk to. We argue with each other all the time. I want people to challenge me. And so they want them to tell me their ideas. And a lot of times, well, at halftime or whatever, I'll say, no, I'm not doing that. But I need someone to tell me that. I want someone to, you want people who really feel like they have a voice and they can, they are part of the program as much as you. So I think that's the key.
Yeah, and inheriting coaches is always kind of a scary thing, but it's tremendous when it works out. I know it
So
worked for
totally.
me, and it's tough because there's a lot of people that know the sport, right? They understand the sport. They might have played it and they were really good. You always get those people, oh, I was really good at it, but
Right.
being able to coach it
You
and
know how to
get
teach it. Yeah.
yeah, it's a whole different ball game. And so, I always found balancing out a good staff. I mean, I learned from a great head coach in Serge Clivio of, what to look for in staff. And I always find it interesting what other coaches look for as kind of their must or their big things in order for them to be a part of their program.
Yeah. I think on that same line, you want to have someone who's a teacher I don't mean necessarily they have to be a teacher, but they have to be able to teach. Right. Knowledge is not the prerequisite. It's nice. And you need people who have knowledge of the sport and things like that. But, there are too many people out there that, I wouldn't say what they're doing is necessarily teaching. They're rolling the ball out and the kids are playing but I want people who want to also get better. I don't want people who are satisfied with, yeah, I know enough about this. You want someone who's constantly saying, you know what, I want to think of a new way of doing this or a new way of teaching this. I want to go to a clinic. I want to keep on getting better at this. Or, you know what, we run a 2-2-1 press, but I don't like the way we're doing it. I'm going to go to this high school guys practice. I remember one year, the year we finished 1-19, I had nowhere to go for playoffs. And I just started literally just emailing all these guys and can I come to your practice Tuesday? Can I come to yours Thursday? And, you got to be willing to do that and willing to just continue to learn. I mean, it's beautiful. Every sport. So it's such a beautiful game, but you have to be willing to say, I'm never going to be perfect, but I'm willing to learn more and more.
Yeah, I mean, and every game changes. I mean, you watch the NBA 15 years ago to what it is now, it's different. You watch the NFL, it's different. I mean, every sport,
Right.
it's different. So you mentioned like educating yourself. How do you go about educating yourself in an off season? I mean, you mentioned some things of going to practices. Are you going to clinics? Are you doing webinars? I mean, is it kind of all the above?
I would say all the above, especially with the quarantine that happened this spring. I mean, I was doing webinar after webinar, sending so many different clinics. I've done, I think first when a season ends for me is I open a Google Doc and I just start writing. I start writing all the things that I thought I could have done better at, the things that as a team we didn't do good enough, that we need to improve, ideas, find more rebounding drills or, a lot of it's more, I guess, my self-reflection. So I spent some time doing that. Naturally, I talk to my other coaches and I want their feedback. But then, yeah, I do the DVDs, I do clinics. I'm sure you've experienced this. Sometimes it's just you go to a clinic and you listen to 5 speakers and only one of them really has something that you could use for your program. I mean, it's such a specific thing. I find like high school coaches, usually their clinics are better. A lot of times, same thing with DVDs. I've spent $40 on so many DVDs that I played 5 minutes of it and said, "Oh God, this is not going to work." So,
Yeah.
but I'm still willing to fork over the money, and I'm still willing to to learn. Yeah, I mean, I watch a game. I'm probably like you. I pause it sometimes, and I have to write things down, or I DVR games where I want to run a set that Villanova is running or whatever. You start probably driving everyone around you a little crazy, but when you're a junkie or for the sport, that's what you do.
Yeah, I remember there was a few years when, TCU defensively football wise was very good. And I found myself just like recording all their games, like finding what time they were on and just recording them or finding them online if I couldn't get it on TV because, they ran a 3-5-3 and it was just something I was really interested in getting to learn more about. And, they ran just a different tile, like a 5-3-3, like they just had different kind of lineups and alignments that I liked on defense and just wanted to educate myself more with it. So I totally get it. The game game's always evolving, and you have to keep learning, because if you don't, that's when you start, seeing the downward spiral of things, when you start
Absolutely.
becoming content and just thinking that every player and every team you have is the same. It's not always the same.
That's right.
COVID-19. I mean, I've asked all my coaches about this. Girls basketball is one of the real sports that can be played year round. And obviously once COVID hits in March, it affects, spring league and summer leagues and maybe even fall leagues early on. Talk about the effect COVID's had on your program and how you've been navigating your team, because I know teams are starting up, I believe, next week. Some teams the 14th, some teams maybe a little later than that. But talk about how you navigated your team through this situation from, really from you guys had a tough loss, right? And then boom, COVID hit.
It was kind of all at the same time. So we played Millbury in the D3 Central Finals. We lost. 2 days later, they went on to play the winner of the West, who they lost to, Hoosick Valley, and then that was the last game played. So it all happened pretty quickly in terms of COVID and everything being shut down. Yeah, I mean, I think I tried in the beginning to do probably a lot of what other people did and just keep communication, just check on kids' social, emotional health, less on basketball. When we got closer to summer, I started to get a little nutty, and I started to create workouts, my summer workout programs. I started to create like my website for the first time, things I hadn't had time to do, and I created like a shooting program for the summer called the 5,000 Makes Club, where kids got t-shirts. So I just started to do some different things, because it looked like summer league wasn't going to happen either, which eventually it didn't. But after that, I would say some of my kids played fall AAU, which was good. Most of them play soccer though, so they have not. But we were allowed to start open gym about 3 weeks ago, and I don't think a lot of schools have been doing open gym.
Yeah.
But we were given the go ahead, which I'm very thankful to my superintendent and school committee. So it's been awesome. I obviously can't do anything, but it's just been great just to see kids. We can have 24 kids in there, and they just scrimmage and do their own thing, and so that's been good. I'm looking forward to hopefully next Monday getting this thing started. But, for the kids, there's a lot of stress. Is this thing going to happen? And are we going to cancel this? And I have two girls who are seniors, two really special players that would have been 1,000-point scorers if we had a regular season. But with a 10-game season, that's not going to happen. So I've felt tremendously bad about that. So it's more conversations about how you're doing than probably how's your game looking.
Yeah. Man, I didn't even think of that aspect of it. Like people who were sniffing 1,000 points or close to it are now losing significant games. Oh, I didn't even think of that. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I had one girl who was 200 points away, and we usually play a 22-game schedule. So, and the other girl was 300, but she would have easily done it, and these kids have been looking at those banners, since watching those earlier teams, and, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I create like my own special banner on the side, like, hey, don't forget about these kids. But I feel so bad because they devoted so much time.
Right. Oh, that's a shame. That's a different aspect of it that I didn't even think of.
Yeah.
So talk about your schedule a little bit then, because obviously you're 10 games, so I'm guessing you guys just decided you're going to play in league and that's it. Have there been any discussion about? I know some teams in the fall were doing like league, championship tournaments, like seeding them and so on. Is there any talk like that at all in your guys' league, or is it just kind of a straight game schedule?
So yeah, we have we're playing the TVL small. We have a large and a small, even though we're the super small. So we'll play our 10 games, home and away, same week, to minimize contact with other schools. And then they've left a week at the right before February vacation, which could be a TVL tournament week. But it also could be, I think, a makeup week. I'm pulling hard for this tournament because our league did not have anything in the fall. And I think the abruptness of how it ended was very tough for kids. I noticed a lot of leagues around us had those tournaments that you were talking about. And, I think it would be the coolest thing to have a, 12 team, let's see, the large and the small, let's play them all together. And, you get a chance at it, even if you didn't win the TVL small or large, you're in the tourney now, kind of like the Big East tournament I always think about because I'm a Big East guy, but I hope it happens.
Yeah. I mean, Big East tournaments were the best. I mean, those, I
Definitely.
always watch those, Madison Square Garden. So,
Uh, it was on my bucket list, but I never went.
well, hopefully someday. Hopefully we
Mm.
get back to some sort of normal here. So you mentioned it earlier, and you kind of hit upon it again. Social media, and social media is the number one rising things I'm seeing in a lot of high school programs in Massachusetts, no matter what sport it is. How active are you on social media with your team, or as a coach, or is the school athletics on control these pages? I mean, talk about your social media department and how you're able to kind of communicate all the great things that are going on in your program.
Yeah. So, so I have my own Twitter. I do send things out that way, or at least I try to promote the kids. I obviously send my scores into Keith Pearson like everyone else after a game. Besides for that, like I said, I've tinkered with this website to try to make things a little easier for parents. I've tried to create like a history section and alumni section, and I'm trying to add my summer league stuff. So that's been kind of fun. I would say though, in social media, our athletics department is really good about it. We have like an assistant AD that's kind of like his forte. So he's made these game days that come out the day of the games, where he really does a nice job of promoting the kids. He writes a little article about the two teams playing that night, and he kind of gets them hyped up. So that's been really cool. We have a really good TV production department, very strong TV production department. So they've been pretty good about bringing kids in for interviews and doing profiles and things like that. But yeah, personally for myself, I've been on Twitter. I probably should be doing more, but that's all I have time for at the time.
Yeah, I mean, doing research on you, there's just so much out there about your program, whether it's an online articles or, hard newspaper articles. And, you're doing a lot of great stuff out there. So maybe you don't know as much of the stuff that's out there, but there's a lot of good stuff out there about you and your program and how you run it. So Google yourself. Google yourself.
All right, will do.
So, I always ask coaches these last couple questions to just
when I
kind of
Google myself, though, my hairline always looks a lot better.
Yeah, you always look younger and better when you Google
You always
yourself.
do, yeah. And then I notice like kids will tell me like, "Oh, you got sweat stains," and it's like, I sweat like the whole game, and I try not to. All right, sorry. What were you gonna say?
No, I love it. I get it. I was a disaster when I coached. I was always a
Definitely.
sweaty mess. So, I always ask coaches these questions just for the young coaches that are listening out there. I do get a lot of feedback from young coaches that, ask questions about, oh, make sure you ask this question. So it's cool to hear from younger coaches, but what's your advice to them? Someone who's just starting out or maybe thinking about taking that jump into going for a head coaching job. What would be your advice to young assistant coaches today?
Yeah. Well, obviously, start somewhere. If you have a choice, you want to be under someone who hopefully has some experience and some success. But I think when you become part of a program, you need to go there to just not be part of it, but to soak up as much as you can. I remember like going to practices early, like my notebooks were filled up. Like I was, as much as I was trying to help, I was also trying to learn. So I didn't want to give up one or the other. So I would be helping the practice, but when the head coach was running something, I knew that was a drill that I needed to do for my freshman program. So I wasn't going to be a bystander. I'd write it down, and then I would try it the next day. Or if a coach was running an offense, I realized that was for me too. And, I'd just be active and try to, do everything, that they wanted to do. I think, you learn and you try to do as much as you can. I think when you become a coach, you need to know though, what really are your core values? Like, what are the things you care about? I think one of the things that happens naturally is people try to be someone they're not. You try to act like, some guy who was your high school coach or some guy on TV. Like, you got to be who you are. So whatever you care about, those are the things you care about, because you'll talk to any coach, and something I'm going to care about. I'm going to say, I don't let my kids do this. You might not even care. You don't want your kids to dress up for away games, then don't make a rule about it. If you're going to make a rule, you have to be willing to enforce it though. If you're going to have some type of expectation, you better really care about it deeply, because one time you're going to get challenged on it. And you're going to have to, you have to validate why you, whatever that situation was. So I just think those are the two things I would say. I would say you need to, when you're an assistant, do as much as you can and study. But also start to think about early as possible, who you want to be as a coach and how you're going to be, how you're going to behave, how you're going to act. Think about those things.
That's great. I love that, enforcing rules. And, as a head coach, sometimes you're right. You say something and then someone kind of breaks it and somebody else breaks it. And all of a sudden you're not really enforcing it. And I think that's sometimes a poor message that you're trying to send out as a coach, that you're not really reinforcing the things that you told them they need to do. So
yeah, kids want consistency. Yeah. That's the biggest thing. If you're a phony, they're going to tell you, they're going to know you're a phony right away. So it's okay if you don't know, exactly what you care about, but don't make up arbitrary things. I think is, just figure out exactly who you want to, and you can add. We always say, you know what, that I don't care about as much. I don't know why I used to harp on that. And that's fine too. But I think just being honest with kids, you can push them and you can grind them and you can tell them you're never going to give them an inch and you're never going to take it easy on them. And you can do all those things, but you got to do it with love and you got to do it with what you believe in.
It's the balance, right? I mean, it is the absolute balance. If you're going to work them, you got to know how to balance to love them too. And they need to feel that. So totally agree. And obviously you alluded to a lot of different things throughout this episode, but one thing you mentioned is, your off season is, you're writing notes down. You're already kind of starting to prepare and think. You're going to college practices or other high school team practices or summer leagues, and you're coaching. Sacrifice wise, I mean, I know you're married, you have kids. Talk about the sacrifice you have made from a young age on to really get to the point of, where you are.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot. It's a lot, obviously, for my wife on the other end. She's been really supportive and she's been good. She's happy for our success, but sometimes the fact that our season goes a lot longer and tends to go long, it makes for a long winter for sure. So, I think you try to do your best when you're here, and I try to do better to be present. I'm sure you've experienced this. When I'm home, sometimes during the season, I'm not home mentally. You're still running through a game, or you wonder if you should watch one more film. I'm a film junkie. Like I want to see a team play like 37 times, I'm a little, but there's a point where I know sometimes you just have to find some balance and you have to spend some time with those people who've been sacrificing so much for you. I'm not even close to being good at it yet. I know I'm not. I'm not fair or consistent. But I try to just at least be aware of it and try to get better at it, as much as I can. But it's tough because you feel like if you really want to compete and you want to be good, like you have to outwork everyone. So it's tough not to grind.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, there were nights I remember, put my twins down there, half a year old, 7, 8 months. They're waking up in the middle of the night. I get them down and then I'm on the computer kind of watching film, and it's
totally.
You're like, you know what? I got to watch this series again, and so you find yourself doing those things. And it's because, like you said, if you want to be great, then you have to work hard. And the person who needs to work the hardest is you. If you're expecting your kids to work hard and doing all the things you got to ask them to do, then you got to make sacrifices too. And unfortunately, sometimes it comes at a price. And, coaches figured out how to balance it out. And, every great coach has a great, wife behind them or a woman behind them who supports them. And, you seem really lucky to have that. So that's great. And
definitely,
it's not easy. And my wife is the same way. So I get it. Totally. But we're going to jump into our 2-minute drill. But before we do, I just want to say thanks for coming on. I took a lot of notes. I think you have a lot of great stuff to say. We don't really know each other on a personal level, though just talking to you, I feel like we do. And just doing my homework on you, I was just, tremendous coach. And you run a great program. And I think, a lot of basketball coaches or just a lot of coaches in general can learn a lot from you in the things that you do.
Anthony, thanks so much. Yeah, it was it was easy to talk to you, and I appreciate it. I could talk, as we mentioned before, I could talk for another hour or so with you about coaching. It's fun.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. We'll definitely have you back on here for sure. But I love this segment. I get the most feedback from my coaches in this last segment that they love it and they love being kind of on their toes with things. And if you've watched a few episodes, you might know that you always get some questions you got to think about a little bit and be able to explain. So how it works is I'm just going to rapid fire as many questions I can at you for 2 minutes. Most of the time it's like 1 or 2 word answers. If you want to explain yourself, I'm pretty lenient. You can explain yourself.
All
but I
right.
do get a red flag that I do get to throw if I want to challenge something you said, or just really just have you explain it more and why. And I'll give you one as well because you may want to explain yourself. So it's fun. And like I said, coaches love it. So let me just get the timer set.
All right.
And here we go. So who is your biggest rival? Who would you say is the biggest rival you guys have?
Right now, Millbury.
Okay. The biggest victory you've had in your coaching career?
We beat Cohasset in 2009 South Sectional Final.
Awesome.
They were honestly the best team in the state that year. It was incredible.
Wow, that's great. On the flip side, what would be your toughest loss you've had as a coach?
Oh, Jesus. I would say the state title game against Cathedral in 2016. That was a tough one.
Okay. What would you prefer, like a stud point guard, or would you prefer like a stud center under the hoop dominates?
Point guard.
I'm going to throw the flag. I would love to hear that. I'd love to hear that.
So I find in girls basketball, hopefully this doesn't come off as sexist, but it's tough to find a lot of girls who want to play point. They don't want the responsibility. They don't want the pressure sometimes. But when I've had really good point guards, we've had really good teams. We've had some really good bigs too. I've had some excellent post players. And we're like the smallest team every year. Like I think I've coached 1 6-footer. But I'll take a point guard all the time because the point guard controls the whole game for you.
That's awesome. And probably the way you guys play too, you get the ball up the court real quick. So
right.
Yeah.
I can compromise a few post moves.
Yeah. Okay. How many technicals have you got in your career, would you say?
One.
No,
okay. Two. I got one in a JV game. And then I got one in a varsity game.
Okay. Any buzzer beaters, whether you guys hit one or got one against you in your career? Just talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, both obviously. But I'll go back to that Cohasset game. So we beat Cohasset at Braintree High in front of 3,000 people, and a girl hit a shot at the buzzer. Her name is Shannon Heffernan, and it put us on the map. That led us to our first state title, and it was incredible. It's on YouTube. If you ever Google it sometime, Millis Cohasset, it's incredible.
I definitely will. All right, a couple more, coach. Style of coaching. You were like a big yeller and screamer. Are you pretty quiet? You pace? Are you like one of those coaches that just squats in the same position, doesn't move?
Man, I would all the above. Yeah. So I sit down on the bench for the jump ball and that's it. And then I'm up. I don't think I'm a yeller. I think in practice I'm a yeller, but when the games start, I actually, at least not at I don't think I work the refs. I don't really believe in a lot of that crap. You do your coaching in practice, really. And I tell my kids that too. Like, I'm going to push you. I might get at you a little bit in practice sometimes, but in a game in front of your peers, in front of your parents, like, I think there's a respect factor. Like, let kids play and just, but I'm active. I would say I'm very active in the game.
I like it. Okay, that's great. Last question. We've talked about all the successful teams you had. What team was the best team you had that didn't win a state championship?
Ooh, I would probably say,
and I'll let you explain it because obviously you're going to need to, I'm guessing.
Yeah, especially if they listen to this. Thanks, Coach, for telling us we're the biggest disappointment you ever had. In a weird 2019, we went 19-1, and I will not tell you that's the best team I ever had. We were kind of thoroughly surprised. We started the season off 16-0, and we were like, "What is going on?" Like, we're not, we weren't that good, but we had really good chemistry, and we had good talent, but the chemistry was off the charts. And I think that team, we lost to Hoosick Valley who's a perennial Western power. Uh, I think we would have won the whole thing if we had gotten by them. It was just a really special team. I would have loved, but I'm not sure. I mean, they also, at the same time, I'm telling you that they overachieved because they weren't the most talented. So it's tough. I wish we could have got to the big show for them.
Yeah, is that the only team that you've had that's actually won the Tri-Valley, right?
That's correct, which may have been more difficult than a state title.
Yeah.
And I'm not, that's not tongue in cheek. I don't know if that'll happen again. That was unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, all right, Coach. Well, you survived the 2-minute drill.
Nice.
And I appreciate it again for having you on and just like listening to you and just the type of program that you run. I think this is great for young coaches to hear, like I said, and just know that there's a lot of value in what you said. And, the proof's in the pudding. I read all your statistics. I read everything at the beginning. So I'm really lucky to have you on here and really just venture into the world of, girls basketball and seeing how many great coaches there are out there who've gone from the boys world to the girls world, in basketball and the success that they've had.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much for having me. I wish you all the success in the world. I think it's a great idea that you're taking high school coaches and you found this medium that I don't think it does really exist. I hope this continues to do well for you, but I've loved talking to you.
Yeah, seriously. I love to have you back on here. And, it's a great story to tell. I think just coaches, there's so many different styles of coaching and, limitations to numbers and, having big programs or small programs or so on and so forth. So to me, it's amazing to be able to capture that all and to really, personify the individual in you and let parents know and let their players know this is the type of leader I am, and let people know who they have. And I think the community is really lucky to have you. The youth programs. If I'm a youth coach and I'm listening to you, I'm like ready and fired up for wow, the head coach takes serious. They invest in us, and it's just awesome stuff, Coach. Great job.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So from Beyond X's and O's, this is Anthony Petralis signing off. Thank you so much, Dave Fallon. Thanks for coming on. And next week we'll have Brent Greenberg on, our video social person from Boston College. So we're really excited. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Take care.